In part 1, we looked at splitting the octave into 2 even parts, creating the tritone, the characteristic tension of the dominant 7th chord. In part 2, we considered splitting the octave into 3 equal parts and saw the symmetrical augmented triad. In this third and final installment, we're going to consider splitting our octave into 4 equal parts. 12 divided by 4 is 3. I can split this octave into 4 notes, 3 frets apart, a minor third. In stacking thirds, we are again creating a chord. When we have 4 notes stacked in thirds, we create a 7th chord. So this is a 7th arpeggio, a 7th chord, but what kind? With E as our root, E is our reference, so G is a flat 3 when compared to E major. This note will be E, G, B. It must be a B. It's a 5th. It will be a B flat. So E, G, B flat, the 3 notes of an E diminished triad. This will be a D note. It is a D flat. What is a D flat in relation to E? This D flat will be a 7th. We've established it's a 7th chord, but what kind of 7th? The shortcut to 7ths, if you've seen my approach before, is with the root note. Down a half step is a major 7th, 7. Half step below that is the flat 7. We've flattened it. So if I flatten a flat 7, I can have, this does exist, a double flat 7. The interval giving this arpeggio and chord its name, the diminished 7th. So this is an E diminished 7th arpeggio. In terms of a chord shape, this, but more commonly maybe probably something like that. Do know that some instructors and some books will identify the diminished 7th as a root, flat 3, flat 5, 6. It sounds the same, but theoretically not quite right. As with the augmented triad, this is a symmetrical chord because each of the chord tones are an equal minor third 3 frets apart. So what that means for our chordal playing is that if this is E diminished 7th, this will be also E diminished 7th with the root on string number 1, as will this with the root on string number 4, as will that with the root on string number 2. Each inversion of this diminished 7th can be found by moving it up or down 3 frets horizontally. And that will work from any shape for the diminished 7th chord. This symmetry can also be seen on the circle of fifths. Once again, we have this diamond or square formation, however you want to view it, and which rotates around the circle. Now we have 3 rotations before we find ourselves back at the same notes, showing us that there are only 3 diminished 7ths realistically in music. Why is that? Well, because like with the augmented triad, we can consider any of these 4 notes as being the root. So that's the theory. How do we use this practically? If you've learnt your tritone shape, you will see from this chord shape here that we have 2 tritones on strings 4 and 3 and on strings 2 and 1. Now that means we've got like double tension. This is a super tense chord, but the resolution to that can come in a multitude of different directions. We saw in part 1 that the tritone can resolve to its 1 chord when we think of it as part of a dominant 7th. That 1 chord can be indeed major or minor. Now with 2 tritones in our chord shape, if you think about it doing the maths, we've got at least 8 chords that the diminished 7th could theoretically resolve to. Any of those 4 notes in that chord you can resolve to a chord which is a half step higher than any of those notes in the chord, or a whole step lower. Choosing any diminished 7th at random, play it through a couple of inversions, up 3 frets, up 3 frets, up 3 frets. This note on string 4, I can go up a half step, and it works. I'm ended up in C. Let's do that again, but resolve on the note on string 3. Let's go to here. That's got me to E flat. Doing the same thing, but thinking about resolving on a note on string 2. If I go here, A, so I could resolve it to A. The note on string 1, that takes me to a C chord. There's an element of trial and error, just exploring the sound of this chord a little bit, just to think about how this thing can resolve. In a little context, C to D minor 7, okay? What I could do is, knowing if I'm going to this D note here, I could come in from a half step underneath with a diminished 7th chord. Check it out. So this is C, then this will be way I can play a diminished 7th rooted on string number 5, and then that works nicely into that D minor 7. So I took it from the half step underneath or a whole step from above. And that's the beauty of this chord. You can move it around, and then to be practicing the sound of the diminished 7th and the arpeggio and the chords, what I'd recommend, much like the augmented triad, is to practice playing through minor thirds on the fretboard. In doing so, you're playing the diminished 7th arpeggio. So you could do this like we did before, again from the open E string. So minor thirds, 3 frets. There's a minor third there. Minor third, minor third, minor third, minor third, minor third, minor third. And there is this diagonal nature to the diminished 7th arpeggio. And the cool thing about this then is that arpeggio, you can resolve up a half step or down a whole step. I can just play around with it. And just resolve up that half step. Another example. Ends on B. So the diminished 7th is such a valuable chord as it's a substitution for the dominant 7th, but it allows you to take your music in any direction almost that you wish. You practice well, and I'll see you in the next one.